The Battle of Stoney Creek was a pivotal clash of the War of 1812, fought on June 6, 1813. The British-Canadian attacked at night and defeated a much larger force of Americans and turned the tide against the advancing American forces and helped secure southern Ontario from U.S. occupation.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The group that you see before you are the drums of the Crown Forces 1812. We do not represent any specific regiment of fifers and drummers, rather we honor all the fifers and drummers that participated in the In 1745, Haughty Prince Charlie landed in Scotland and gathered a bunch of Highland clans together in the hope of reclaiming the throne of Scotland, Ireland, and England on behalf of his father. And it started out pretty well for him. Just outside of the city of Edinburgh, his army won a resounding victory over the British Army at the time, led by Sir John Cope. And so the next piece we're going to play for you is actually a British music of the period that was written about John Cope's defeat, which may seem rather ironic. And it's called Hey John Cope, Are You Walking Yet? And it's about the fact that Sir John Cope, that is the general of the British Army, essentially ran away from all his men in defeat and reported to headquarters that he'd been defeated, which isn't a good tactic if you want to get promotion.
Short on supplies, short on munitions, and short on men. They were worried that the overwhelming American forces, backed up by their Navy on the lake, would easily wipe them out. Brigadier General John Vincent had actually openly discussed withdrawing as far as Kingston and abandoning the entire colony. Cooler heads eventually would poke up and say, we have to do some resistance. The concern being is falling back and abandoning the colony is bad enough, but if they did so, they would also be abandoning their allies, with the Six Nations out on the Grand River, and of course Tecumseh's Confederacy on the western frontier. In a desperate situation, British officers scouted the American camp and discovered, to their shock, it was very poorly laid out. Spread out miles, with troops as far away as the lake from here, posted to watch a potential boat location. They were also scattered further inland away from the creek, and this wide and spread out position, also with cooking fires laid out that illuminated the camp, led the British troops to believe that there was an opportunity to launch an attack. And so they gathered about 700 men, set out in the dead of the night with the plan to launch a quick and sudden strike into the enemy force to knock them off kilter and buy themselves time in case they needed reinforcements to come in.
Maybe we got this. Okay.
American pickets in front of us here have spread out. This is known as light infantry drill for the time period. Troops would spread out and support each other, oftentimes in pairs, and they would try to stagger their fire at the enemy. The pickets and light infantry drills will have a similar duty. They're not meant to stop an enemy or do anything of great damage. They're meant to harass, slow down, and give warning to the rest of the army. It also knows the kneeling, which makes them a smaller target. And one of the most common questions we get asked is, why did they stand up 200 years ago? Well, it's the muskets. With the muskets of this time period, you have to load them using the ramrod. The easiest way to do so is just standing up. So if you want to get more light across the battlefield than your enemy, you have to stand up. The other than lying down, you do it. force the American camp. There's nearby one point to join into the action. In the confusion, many of them got jumbled up, lost their officers, and began listening to other officers. Anybody could give them commands. And this breakdown in command made the American forces a lot less coherent in the way that they could resist. Fearing that there might be a larger attack, many of the forces further flung out the American camp refused to move, believing that they would be part of an attack at any moment as well. And so they hunkered down. Didn't seem like the best idea, but quite frankly, yes. The muskets of the time period are smoothbore flintlocks. I mentioned those rifles earlier. Only a small number of troops had those rifled muskets. It was cheaper and faster for a soldier to load and fire if he was using a smoothbore. But that means accuracy is out the window. A good, well-trained soldier, 50, 60 yards, yeah, he can hit what he's aiming at. But the rate of variance meant that at 100 yards, you potentially could miss a target 9 feet in any direction. Most battles are fought at 200 yards, so you can figure out the odds of hitting something, even if it was the broadside of a barn. So, firing the volleys helps counteract that problem, using volume of fire. It also counteracts another problem, because as you've been watching, you may have noticed sometimes when the soldiers pull the trigger, nothing happens. Being a flintlock means it's a piece of flint striking a piece of steel to create a spark, ignites powder in a side pan, which travels through a clutch hole into the main charge inside the barrel. That's a lot of steps, and it's exposed to the elements. Not to mention black powder is extremely temperamental in dampness. Wind can blow it away. It's almost like pain how easy it can blow away. So that means that in good conditions, a flintlock can miss fire as often as 20% of the time. If it's windy, rainy, or snowy, or the musket's in an odd mood, you gotta stick. So by firing those volleys, you had the volume to ensure that a working musket was going to hit something, even at 200 yards away. So, as much as it seems silly, this is the best way to fight. Now you can start to see one of the problems of the black powder battlefield: smoke. Black powder produces 20 times its own volume in thick blue-gray smoke, so it did not take long for a field to become covered in the smoke, the infamous fog of war. Now, probably the most common question everyone wants to know is, why do the British wear bright red standing on an open field? Well, the thickness of that smoke, the bright uniform identifies the captain on the battlefield as French. The idea is the bright, elaborate uniform gave better identification, similar to how sports teams had very elaborate uniforms. The armies of this time period wanted to be seen. So the British are in red because it was the cheapest dye they had available when they chose the color. The Americans are in blue because that's the color cloth the French gave them during the American Revolution. So this led to red and blue, but you notice there are green-coated troops directly behind me. There's some Americans in gray. What do you think happens to them when it's red versus blue? Well, unfortunately, they get shot at by everybody. Friendly fire was a serious problem throughout the war. In fact, during the Battle of Stoney Creek, there was an American cavalry unit that attempted to launch a charge in the darkness against the British. As they charged forward and began hacking, slashing with their sabers, they quickly realized they had accidentally charged into an American unit. Friendly fire is a serious problem, so if you want to survive, bright uniform and stand up. I should ask, we got any good loyal Canadians in the crowd? Well, raise a cheer, because we have a unit on the battlefield that is 100% Canadian. They're over there fighting for the Americans. Get them every year. But the Canadian Volunteers was actually a unit raised mostly out of the Niagara. But they had some local people, including a man by the name of Abraham Markle, who became second in command. He was actually a member of the legislature for much of this area during the time. So, got to be careful sometimes of those elected types. And they raised about 150 men who served throughout 1813 into 1814. And these men fought hard. And that was because they knew the cost if they were captured or if they lost. If they lost, they would lose everything in Canada that they held. If they were captured, they had already been pre-sentenced to execution, hanging, drawing, and quartering. The punishment for treason. Now, just to show you, we do have a hundred a foot. Those of you who paid attention in grade 7 history class, that's General Brock's old unit. He was the colonel of it when he came to Canada in 1803. 49th served extensively throughout the Niagara and throughout the War of 1812 and earned many nicknames. In the aftermath of during the skirmishing, they would earn the nickname of the Bloody Boys and the Green Tigers for their fighting against American skirmishers in the woods. You'll notice one of the soldiers of the 49th in front of you has got a pike, large spear, and a lot of people ask, what are you doing carrying a pike out on a black powder battlefield? But sergeants would carry them, and that would be kind of a marker. So you could look across, see where the pike was, you knew where a sergeant was, you knew where to rally if things went bad, but also the sergeant was going to use it sometimes as encouragement, even leveling it and helping push men into battle and steady them if they had to. And the 49th had the benefit of having a very good sergeant in battle, sergeant by the name of Fraser. Cloaked their numbers as they pushed into the American forces. Remember as well, as I said, the Americans spread out their forces, so much of the army was just standing around waiting for someone to give them orders. Unfortunately for them, Generals Chandler and Winder had rushed forward to the sound of combat, and in their confusion, they fell into his hands. Chandler was captured first. Winder attempted to raise a defense for himself as the British pushed forward. The 49th, that Sergeant Fraser I mentioned, leveled a bloodied bayonet straight at him as Winder leveled his pistol to him. Fraser, in a firm voice that only a sergeant can muster, said to him, "You stir, you die, sir." Winder surrendered. American had never met an indigenous person, had never dealt with their culture, and as a result, the only way they learned about it was hearsay, sensational news articles, books that would put lurid pictures into it. As a result, the average American believed that a warrior of the Grand Nation was a fearsome monster that would gobble you up if he got the chance. And of course, we know that's absolute nonsense. They're human beings, but if it scares the enemy. So many of the British actually was noted to mimic some of the war cries of their allies as they charged in, and many of the Americans were whipped up into a fearful frenzy over the idea of being wiped out by the Allies. To really push the Americans off, they had to make it soon. And so it was tasked to the 49th. Off in the distance were the artillery pieces. They pointed them out. The order was given, fix bayonets, take the guns, and they charged forward. As luck would have it, Winder's last order before he was captured was he ordered the guns to stop firing, fearing that they were firing upon their own men. as they charged towards loaded cannon. The artillerists, unsure if they were being approached by friend or foe, and the British fearing that at that close of range, they would be torn to pieces if the Americans fired. Held a council of officers and out of caution withdrew. Stony Creek would be the high water mark. The Americans would never push this far through the Niagara into Upper Canada again. The success of 1813 would not be repeated. Has been walked before. It is a tradition that we recognize those and pay homage to them, knowing that we do our best to represent those who we portray. And we do that through the playing of a lament. The fife and drum will march out, play a lament, and during the playing of the lament, we ask that you please observe silence and, if possible, remove your caps.
Hello. Good day. How are you?
And yourself?
Pretty good. Weather's great.
Beautiful. Aren't you hot in those t-shirts that you're wearing?
What's that?
Aren't you hot in that shirt? You maybe want to wear some wool.
I'm sure.
Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did.
Well, we're welcome. And you want to participate? So you're going to make them?
You know what? That's a good question. I just heard the drone thing to
They are a functioning firearm.
And the only difference is, right? I mean, you guys are fighting guns. You're just putting in the powder.
You're cooking up supper.
Did you have my full attention? Yeah. You were talking on that, and then you guys together, let's all this battle.
And push it all the way down, nice and tight. Real good. Got to bring out. Password. What's the password? Okay, and I'm ready to go. So this is a flintlock.
Well, head on.
Okay. So with the flintlock,
Well,
he said flint. And when it launches, it hits the prism, which then opens it, and all the spark hits the black powder in the pan, which sends it into the gun, to the barrel, and then fires that musket ball out the end. You guys want to see how big? So this is no, there's nothing in there. We haven't fired this gun yet today. But as you can see,
walk away, but I got something that increased my range.
ball.
Why?
So you guys play with marbles? Yeah, it's one of your bigger marbles. I'm fired.
That looks otherwise. So is this a musket?
This is a musket. My buddy Terry is using a rifle.
And the difference, I'm not loaded, so if you look down the barrel of the gun,
Yeah.
you'll notice I have a grooves in there,
Yeah.
where he does not. Smooth bore. I'm a smooth bore. So the rifling, what it does is gives more of a precise shot.
It spins the bullet like a football.
Yes.
What is this?
And so
This is the exact same thing as that one, where it's smooth.
Yep.
And that is also.
This is a Brown Bess Model 1.
Just like
Yeah, so guys, you saw how long
You're gonna be firing.
guys, you saw how long it took for him to load it. Okay, but you saw how long it took for him to load it. Mine is always loaded.
Is it real?
Well, if I fix the bayonet, then it's loaded. I mean, yeah. Then technically,
Is that real?
double loaded.
Yeah, Mario. Should I get popcorn?
You look familiar. Did I see you down in Niagara? You probably a few years ago.
Guys, you like fishing?
What's the story?
How would people think about typing into do not disturb the photo? You guys put it on.
How you doing?
You guys going to war? Going to war? What's that?